Okay, so today I'm going to be showing you how to make a very simple foam sword. So I've been making swords like this for a while, and I like this technique because it's really easy to do and it doesn't require a lot of sanding, because sanding foam is just a pain. So this is a very quick method that you can make a sword really fast. It looks pretty good, and it's foam and rather durable, so you can sword fight your friends with it. I've made several of them over the years, so I have a few to show off here. This is, I think, one of the first ones I made. It was supposed to be like some earth magic sword. I have this pirate cutlass, Percy Jackson's Riptide. This one was supposed to be a little bit more of a futuristic-y sci-fi looking one. This was one of the more recent ones I made using this dragon's head for the hilt, which turned out really cool. And even this tiny dagger is made the same way. So making a sword like this, you just need a couple of things. You need a core, for which you can use a dowel rod, like a wooden dowel, or I like to use these. This is a fiberglass driveway marker. It's about the same size as you can get a dowel rod, and what I like about it is it's a lot more flexible, so it can take a few more hits. I used to make them with dowel rods all the time, but they would break fairly easily. You can actually see in this one, there's a section here that is, I had to fill it back in with hot glue because I was, sword fighting with it, and the dowel rod broke, and so I had to try to reinforce it and stuff it back inside and patch it up with hot glue. So the nice thing about the driveway markers is they don't really do that. So aside from your core, the other key ingredient you're going to need is craft foam, but a big piece of craft foam. I got this roll that was about this size from Amazon. It came in a 2-pack, but you can also get much bigger rolls at a craft store. I wasn't sure if I could still get them after the store that I used to buy them at packed hands closed, but I recently found out they do have them at Joann Fabrics. I stumbled across them one day. So you can get a very big roll of this foam for like $10–15. And you can get a lot of swords out of it. So much better value than this one from Amazon. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to cut 2 halves of the sword out of this foam, glue the core in the center, and glue the edges closed. And then the rest of it is just detailing your hilt and your crossguard and however you want to decorate it. Spray paint it and you have a sword. So let's get started. Okay, so the sword that I'm going to be making today is this sword right here. This is Trunk's sword from Dragon Ball Z. My cousin asked me to make him this for Halloween, and when I told my girlfriend, she said, hey, make me one too. So we're actually going to be making 2 swords today. But I thought this would be a great example because it's a fairly basic looking sword. It's got a nice, easy to construct crossguard, simple blade design, and a nice leather wrapped handle. So I think it'll be a great example of how to make a pretty easy sword. So for starters, I'm going to need to cut down my fiberglass driveway markers to the right length. I took some measurements just using the image that I showed here and my cousin's height, and I did some math, and I determined that the sword should be about 39 inches long, or approximately 1 meter. So I'm just going to use my meter stick and measure these driveway markers, and then I'll go cut them. Okay, now, before I run downstairs and cut these, there's one thing you want to note when cutting fiberglass. It makes a lot of dust. You do not want to breathe in the dust, and if you get it on your hands, it will itch a lot. So, to try to mitigate the amount of dust that it produces, I'm going to wrap some tape around where I'm cutting. And I'm just going to cut very slowly and very carefully, and I'm going to wear a mask. Okay, I'm back. I've cut my pieces down to size. These are pretty easy to cut with just a basic hacksaw. I use my bandsaw because it's a little bit faster. And taping around where I was cutting really helped reduce the amount of dust. So now I'm just going to peel that tape back off. And now we're going to seal up the ends just to make them a little bit safer. If you're sword fighting with them, you don't want the end stabbed through. These aren't as padded as like a actual like Nerf sword or a LARP sword or something, but you can hit them together, and I'm just going to try to keep the ends from poking out a little bit. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to take a hot glue stick, and I'm going to cut it in half with my X-Acto knife. And now I'm going to attach 1/2 to the top of each of these, so there's a nice rubber flexible tip. So the easiest way to do that is to heat up my hot glue gun, melt it a little bit and stick it on, and then I'm going to reinforce it with some cardstock paper wrapped around the edge and glued on so that it doesn't just pop off, and then I'll masking tape over the whole thing. Now that we're done with the rubber ends, we need to make a crossguard. So I'm going to gauge the length of my cord here, and looking at my reference image, it looks like you could probably fit 2 hands comfortably on the handle, and the crossguard should go right about there. So you could do this a bit more specifically, or you could just keep winging it like I'm doing. So let's see here. Room for the pommel. 2 hands. That's going to put my mark about here, which gives us a blade length of about 32 inches. So to keep them both consistent, I'm going to mark that. And that is 32 from the rubber tip, not from the fiberglass tip. So to build a structure for the hilt, I'm just going to use a handful of popsicle sticks and hot glue and a bit more masking tape. When I'm done, I'll cover the whole thing in foam so it'll match the exterior. This is just going to serve as a structure. So it looks like these driveway markers are about 3 popsicle sticks thick. So I'm going to make 2 stacks of 3, 1 to go on each side, for each sword, so I'm going to need 4 stacks of 3 total, and then I'll glue 1 across like that and wrap it all up in tape. So that they sit nicely, I'm going to cut the rounded end off of one side for each of the stacks. And I like to do that with some side snips or wire cutters. It makes a nice cut across the popsicle stick. So that's 1. Now I gotta do a bunch more. Okay, so now that both of our swords have a crossguard, we need to cut out the silhouette of the blade in foam. I measured out these blades to have a width of 2 inches, and I also marked a center line so that when I was gluing the stake in place, I was sure that it was nice and centered. So I marked out every inch on my foam, enough times that I would have enough for 4 halves for the 2 swords, and then I went back and cut with my X-Acto knife every other line, so I had 2-inch blade halves with a center line right down the middle. In order to get a nice symmetrical tip for each blade, I cut a scrap of paper the same width, and then I folded it in half and cut the curve so that I could just trace it onto the foam and cut it out so that both sides were nice and even. Okay, now I have my sword blade profiles cut out. It's time to glue them onto the base. So since I cut them a little bit long, first I'm going to want to line up the tip of the blade where I want the rubber tip to sit. I don't want it to be right at the end. I want there to be enough room that when I match up the other side, that rubber tip will be fully encased. I'm thinking maybe like 1 centimeter from the actual tip of the foam. I'm going to line that up, and then I'm going to cut the extra off the bottom right in line with the crossguard, and then I can just put a bead of hot glue all the way down this center line that I drew, and lay the fiberglass on, wait for that to dry, and then flip it over and do the same thing.
It's a new day and I'm wearing a new shirt. So now I'm going to be gluing the edges of the blade together. In order to do this, I just take 2 popsicle sticks and I apply a little bit of hot glue right on the edge, about the same length as the popsicle stick, and I press the 2 sticks together to seal the edge. And then I just travel all the way down the blade, letting the glue dry and pinching the next little section.
Okay, both blades are done, so it's time to move on to the hilts. So, trunk sword has sort of 2 just rounded ends here and a fairly rounded pommel. So I got from the craft store just these little wooden spheres. They have a slightly flattened edge and a hole in them for use as knobs or something. I got some larger ones and some smaller ones. So I'm going to take 2 of the smaller ones, and they're going to go on the ends here of the crossguard, and then one of the bigger ones is going to be our pommel. So I need to flatten off one of these edges of the popsicle stick. If I'd been paying attention, I could have done that before I glued them all together and just snipped them off, but now that they're one giant piece, I'm just going to have to use a file and flatten them out a little bit. My goal is to have this attach at like a 45-degree angle, which is kind of how it looks in the reference image, and then I'm going to glue it in place. I think I'm also going to take just some wire. I'm going to use some steel hanger wire, but you could use pipe cleaner, string, anything. It's just kind of for reinforcement. I'm going to glue it into the hole and then wrap a little bit around the crossguard so that this is held on with a little more than just glue. I'm going to do the same thing for the pommel too, because I don't want to drill a hole into the fiberglass to like screw this on. So I'll just glue some wire in here with 2 pieces of wire sticking out. I'll wrap it around the remaining piece of the rod, and then when I put my handle on, it will be completely buried inside. So let's do it.
Alright, so I started using a file, but very quickly I gave up and just went and used my belt sander because it was a lot faster. Alright, now it's time to add foam to the hilt. I cut some strips and wrapped around the handle where the leather was going to be, just to beef it up a little bit so it was thicker than just the fiberglass with leather wrapped around it. And then for the crossguard, I cut out pieces and just kind of made a box of foam around the popsicle sticks, since the crossguard for this sword is pretty squared off. So I just started with the top pieces. I tapered them in a little bit at the ends with the balls on it. I kind of did the same on the bottom, and then I cut a long strip that would go all the way across on each side, kind of glued it in place, and then I was able to trim it up a little bit after it was glued.
So the memory card ran out of space while I was working, and I didn't notice, but all that happened was I finished putting the sides of the crossguard on, and I added a strip of foam along the base of the blade right here to match the one in the reference image, and it also helps hide the gap between the blade and the crossguard. That is all of the foam craft, I do believe, so these are ready for paint. Okay, so the painting is now complete. All that I have done is a primer coat of black Plasti-Dip, and then my silver metallic, and then a glossy clear coat to seal it. Couple of notes. One, typically I don't seal them. This is actually my first time using the clear coat sealer, but as you saw at the beginning in some of the older swords that I have, the spray paint's really starting to rub off, so I thought it might be a good idea to hit these with a little sealer and try to protect that finish a bit. Also, I don't typically prime them. That I have been doing more, but some of my first ones definitely didn't prime. I just went straight to silver paint. Also, I just wanted to say that I used this Krylon Fusion all-in-one metallic silver for these, and it wasn't my favorite finish. It was the silver spray paint that I had from some other project, but I've used better silver spray paints in the past. This one was, I don't know, glittery? I felt like it seemed like glittery more so than like a flat metallic silver, so that's just my 2 cents on this paint. It wasn't my favorite silver that I've ever used, but I just did 1 coat of primer, 1 coat of silver, 1 coat of clear, and now all that's left to do is leather wrap the handles.
My leather wrapping technique here is super simple. I have a bunch of leather lace that I just got in a big bundle, and so I just glue the end down with some hot glue. I cut a little bit of a taper so that it kind of nicely squares off against the pommel. I glue that end down, I wrap a little bit, and then I just kind of keep wrapping once the end's secure. Then when I get to the other end, I add a little more glue, and I butt the next lace right up against it, more glue, and keep wrapping. I don't glue the whole way up, just at the ends, kind of where I need it. If you don't have leather lace, you could cut strips of foam and do the same thing here, and it would look fairly leathery.
Alright, that's it. Both swords are finished. I did end up not having enough of this leather, so I went with this slightly lighter color from one of the first leather bundles I ever got, and I did have enough of that to finish this sword. So the handles are slightly different in color, but I actually think both look pretty good in their own way. So yeah, that's the whole process then. So the reason I wanted to show off this sword in particular is just because it's pretty basic, and hopefully you can use your imagination and see that there's a lot of potential for this method, right? You can follow the process, make your blade by sandwiching your foam, and then you can decorate however you want. You don't have to make straight cuts on this blade, right? You can flare it out like a Gladys, or you can do like an asymmetrical kind of, you know, elven thing maybe. I mean, you can't get like crazy curves because you can't really bend the fiberglass and have it hold its shape, but you can get some variation there. You can do wider, shorter, whatever, you know, whatever you're looking for your particular sword. And then obviously your crossguard, your pommel, you can go crazy. You can build it up. You can use Sculpey if you don't want to work with foam. You can kind of glue things to it. My girlfriend made a sword kind of similar to this on her channel. I'll link below. She made like a mermaid sword, so her hilt is covered with seashells. One of the ones I showed you earlier had a dragon. It was literally like a toy dragon that I had that was supposed to like walk, but it didn't work right, so I ended up just taking it apart and using the various dragon pieces. So the head of that dragon became the hilt, and I still have some claws and things that I can use for other stuff. You could do that. You could get like a plastic lion from, you know, Target and cut its head off and have a lion's head hilt, you know, or pommel. You could get a wolf and you could glue a wolf's head on there and make Longclaw from Game of Thrones. It's a pretty simple method. I mean, admittedly, it's not going to be the most fancy, you know, screen accurate, realistic looking foam sword you can make, but it's a good base to start with. You can make them very fast, and they turn out, I think, pretty good. If you want to step it up, you can, you know, get a sanding disc or a belt sander and knock these edges down a little bit, or get your Dremel and shape the foam. You know, you can start small and you can work bigger. So anyway, thanks for watching. I will be popping one of these in the mail to my cousin Robbie. You can find him here, and links in the description. If you want to check out how his costume turns out, hopefully he'll post about it. And the other one will hang out here for my girlfriend. So that's all. Hopefully I'll be doing some more build videos soon. So if you liked it, like it, and subscribe and share it with your friends. See you guys.